Hello, Dave. I think you're muted.
Thank you very much. Hi, this is Dave Stapleton at Mathematica Center for Studying Disability Policy, unmuted. And we're pleased to welcome you here to this webinar. The center has been around for over 10 years now. This is our 43rd webinar. It's my pleasure to moderate the seminar. It's about the Pathways to Career initiative and its efforts to help people with disabilities find meaningful jobs. Many people with disabilities, particularly those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, face significant challenges to finding integrated competitive employment. SourceAmerica, which is a nonprofit that helps administer the Federal Ability One program, has created a customized employment model called Pathways to Careers, or just Pathways, which is to help people with intellectual disability or autism become successful in integrated competitive employment settings. Pathways helps them find jobs that match their capabilities and interests and have potential for long-term career growth. For several years, Mathematica has been evaluating a pilot test of the Pathways model. And today you will hear some of the experiences and outcomes of the Pathways program that was implemented in Davis County, Utah, which is a community just north of Salt Lake City. So we have a great panel of experts on Pathways today. You're first going to hear from Mike Callahan, the president and owner of Mark Golden Associates. He's going to start us off with an overview of what customized employment is and also introduce you to the core elements of the Pathways service model. Next up will be Brian Diatley. He's a senior manager at SourceAmerica, and he's going to talk about the alignment of Pathways practices with the provisions of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and also SourceAmerica's efforts to expand the Pathways service model throughout Utah via its partnership with the Utah State Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. After that, after Brian, Noelle Denny Brown, a colleague here at Mathematica, will present selected findings from the Pathways evaluation about participant outcomes, employer experiences, and the cost of the program. And then we've asked Spencer Burt, who's a human resources manager at Futura Industries, to talk about the employer experience in partnering with Pathways, which is what Futura Industries does. So we're pleased to have him here. Finally, we've got Joe Ashley to wrap up to provide his comments about Pathways. He is the Assistant Commissioner for Grants and Special Programs at Virginia's State Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, the Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. So he will talk about Pathways from the perspective of a state VR program administrator. Let me pause here to introduce Brian Willis, who's our housekeeper and reminded me that I was muted. Thank you, Brian. Brian is going to tell you just a little bit about the controls during the webinar.
Thanks, Dave. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. You can expand each window by clicking on the Maximize icon at the top right of the widget or by dragging the bottom right corner of the widget panel. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available one day after the webcast uses the same audience link used to join today's event. A copy of today's slide deck is listed in the Resource List widget. Looks like a green folder at the bottom of your screen. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget. It has a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. You can also submit technical questions through the Q&A widget. Now back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Brian. So after Joe speaks, we will take your questions from the audience. What we would like you to do is submit your questions electronically at any time through the Q&A panel that's at the bottom of your screen. I will remind you of that later on before Joe speaks, but please feel free to enter questions whenever. And we'll read the questions and ask our panelists to respond. So now I am pleased to turn the controls over to Mike Callahan, our first presenter. Mike?
Okay, thank you, Dave, and good afternoon, everyone, or I think some of you may be in Central Time or others, so good morning to you. And it is my pleasure to take the broader view of the topics that we're going to be covering. And I want to start with just almost every state has some framework for or there's some initiative on what's called employment first. It's been one of the huge successes in employment services, and we'd like to suggest 4 different components of an effective framework. And first is the availability of strategies for this to actually be successful, to assure that employment can be a starting point for services for individuals. And as part of that, both customized employment will be discussed and the Pathways to Career project. And as part of Pathways to Careers, we feel like that while all employment services must be individualized, we need models of service that go beyond just having one person at a time served by a job developer. I'm afraid the number of people in states that are waiting for employment services and the available number of staff would simply be overloaded if we just take a you're next in the queue approach. And we feel like Pathways is one of the answers to that issue. Certainly, sufficient funding and training is necessary. We have to have the capacity, and right now we're still in the process, I think, across the country of developing a sufficient capacity, particularly related to the newer concept of customized employment. And then we've depended on employers to primarily be just that, just employers. But if we're going to be successful with the numbers of people that are currently served in alternatives to employment, we have to have those employers, or we have to have community employers, be fuller partners than we've had before. And some of our experiences through Pathways are indicating that that is indeed possible. Customized employment is one of the most important concepts I feel that's come along in since the beginning of supported employment, now over 30 years ago. And customized employment is an innovation that allows job seekers who would experience barriers in the demands of a job, particularly in the competitive aspect when they're competing against other job seekers and against the complete job description. And it achieves this primarily through a concept of contribution rather than competition. So we work closely with employers to help examine how a workplace can receive contribution. And it becomes necessary when the extent of a person's disability and the demands of a competitive job create an absolute barrier. I think this was realized for years. We had different approaches to try to resolve this issue, but now with customized employment, we have an approach. But please realize, this doesn't mean people have to go through and fail at supported employment in order to be appropriate for customized employment. And one of the things that both MG&A and the Pathways to Career program has done, we've done this for instance, for the VR state agency in Utah, is provide a set of considerations so you help employers make triage decisions far earlier than spending an awful lot of money on competitive supported employment that didn't work, only to then have the realization that one needs customized supported employment. We'd be glad to share those considerations with anyone who would be interested in that. Another real opportunity occurred. I'm sorry I stayed on one slide and should have gone on to the next, so now I'm on slide 9, that we have not had. We had a real breakthrough in customized employment by having Congress recognize and provide a definition for customized employment within WIOA back in 2014. So we have not only a legal definition and statutory language, we have regulations that guide its use, but still there's been a variety of ideas and perspectives around exactly what is customized. And the combination of the WINTAC and YTAC technical assistance centers that provide training and technical assistance to state VR agencies across the country contracted for a group of trainers and consultants, of which we were, Mark Golden Associates was one of those, to come up with a set of essential elements for customized employment and to develop those. Those were developed. They were submitted this year in April to the Rehab Services Administration, to ODEP. They had representatives there, to the Administration on Community Living, and CMS had representatives at this meeting. And they were the elements were accepted. They have not gone through a formal approval process, but they are available, and there will be a link provided for you. This is a very important document to better understand. And what you'll see in the document is that customized employment is described by a number of characteristics, that jobs are negotiated rather than existing, that it's individualized, one person, one job. Pay is negotiated at or above the minimum wage, not subminimum. Work occurs only in regular community businesses or in self-owned businesses by the individual, not by an agency. We recognize that customized is a voluntary relationship on the part of both employers and job seekers. The law actually provides for job development representatives or agents to make this negotiation. We don't put the job seeker or the employment seeker in the position of having to negotiate with an employer, but rather provide an agent or a representative to do this. That the direction for job development would be based on a qualitative process such as discovery rather than a comparative assessment that so many employment seekers with very significant intellectual and developmental disabilities routinely do poorly on. And job seekers can choose either a customized wage relationship with an employer, or if it fits them better, a customized self-employment business. But again, customized, not based on demand. And it's customized employment is certainly for people who are the less likely to succeed with demand-side employment. We're not saying that people with disabilities, by and large, cannot benefit and be successful in employment, in demand-side employment, but rather customized presents an option for us to use. So very, very important that we recognize that. These slides, the next three, present MG&A and our concept of how we've come together in thinking about the components of customized employment, actually starting with discoveries. Discovery looks at an individual in a qualitative way, not a comparative way, but just looks in their life, and we seek to find what are the conditions for success that makes things work in this person's life. What are their general interests in relation to employment, not specific job title interests, for instance, as called for in the CPE, the customized plan, the individualized plan for employment in the Rehab Act, but more of a general set of interests that relate to the person. And then what are their specific potential contributions that could be offered to an employer? You can't fail discovery. This is about who the person is because it's not comparative and it uses a qualitative process. Then in relation to employers, you have to have the other side of the equation. So what do workplaces, businesses, and employment situations get out of this? We feel there are at least three broad areas. One is customized employment can focus on unmet workplace needs. This phrase is actually used in the statutory language of the Rehab Act. We also feel that you can approach employers and potentially target specific tasks that are performed by highly paid people in a workplace that might be better done by a person at an entry wage. And this provides another business deal if an employer's willing to look at and is interested in looking at changing some of the tasks that could be done by a person at an entry wage. And then finally, working with an employer to identify specific ways that their business might be improved. Might be productivity, if the job seeker had that to offer, or other ways of just talking to employees and saying, how could we make your job better? If we can put the perspectives we learn in discovery on the left-hand side of this slide and get them to equal the value that the employer is going to get from this, then we have the ingredients for a successful customized employment job. And that's what we try to do in Pathways, and bringing these concepts conceptually to the job development negotiation has resulted in many scores of employers who are part of the Pathways family of host employers that are participating with us that Brian DeAtley will be talking about shortly. So why do we need something like a Pathways approach? Well, again, what's been missing is a model that intentionally tries to bring all of these ingredients together and at more of a system level than simply a one-person at a time approach. We feel there's still value that Pathways or other such initiatives would never make an individualized one-on-one approach to employment moot, but we need more than that to really kickstart if we're going to be successful in employment first and even beyond that in employment for all. This is a set of core strategies for Pathways to Careers. All people get discovery. Expanded discovery is a concept we coined in relation to paid internships that are available but not required for all people. All people get an integrated supports model, including mental health and behavioral health services if needed. An employment plan is developed to approach a potential employer based on the internship experience. We have been piloting a payroll tax adjustment for employers as an aspect of this. Brian will talk very briefly about that. And then post-employment services and career planning services are provided for all people. We have a regularly occurring career plan post-employment. And then finally, on my part, there's a number of additional features. First, customized and Pathways is a flexible model. It's a learning model, has all the components that exist in Work. We're providing training and certification for our staff so they have a level of competence that's needed. There's a zero exclusion, zero failure. If people if experiences are not successful, we learn from it rather than exclude people. We presume everyone is ready. All people get discovery, at least initial discovery, and they can choose to get expanded discovery. We certainly have a diversity of internship locations. Pathways has used a trade association that's looked at all of the national economy and divided the national economy into 16 segments or sectors, and we have representative host employers from all of those segments that can be used by individuals for their internships if they choose that. We do the same thing for employment. Benefits analysis and counseling is a part of all of this, that paid internships are always matched, not general. We seek to have mutual benefit for both the job seeker or the intern and the employer. And since it's paid, that's legal. It doesn't violate because people are paid more than minimum wage, at or above minimum wage. And all of the components of best practice are included within both the internship and direct employment support, including employer needs analyses, systematic instruction, and support plans developed with the employer in a way that has made employer acceptance and embracing of this concept a reality. So that is my overview, and I'd like to turn this over now to Brian DeAtley. Here's my contact information, and Brian, I turn the next section to you.
Thank you, sir. Again, this is Brian DeAtley from SourceAmerica. And on behalf of SourceAmerica and the Pathways team, I'd like to just really quickly thank Mathematica again, certainly Spencer and Joe and Mike Callahan and the team from MGA for participating with us today. The Pathways to Career program is, the SourceAmerica Pathways to Career program is certainly a little different from the day-to-day operations of the Ability One programs here at SourceAmerica. But it is viewed as integral to the operations here and important to the future of SourceAmerica. They have been, since 2012, we've resourced this in a way that we think is more than adequate, and it's certainly been a very interesting 6 years. We're going to talk a little bit about our demonstration activities today, but the goal from the initial planning when we first sat down with representatives from MGA was always to build on what we viewed as successful and to introduce eventually this program to others in the field and hopefully inform state and federal policy. I hate to, generally speaking, just read a slide, but I want to go through this next one and really recognize our awesome partners out in the field at Pioneer Adult Rehabilitation Center at Park, at Work Inc. in Boston, Massachusetts, at JVS in Detroit, Michigan, and at ServiceSource in Oakton, Virginia. Those are the 4 demonstration sites currently engaged with Pathways to Careers. They've been awesome. I know that we're hard on them at times, and their work is not easy, but certainly without them, we couldn't have gotten to where we are. I also want to reiterate our participant focus to date has been with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and participants with autism spectrum disorders. We have been to date successful in serving cohorts or groups of referrals from facility-based programs, from Medicaid day waiver waiting lists, from transition students coming out of, right now, public high schools, and from people referred through the various state rehabilitation, state VRs that are helping us with Pathways. Certainly not enough time to review all the key statistics, and I want to note that the statistics on this page will be a little and not consistent with some of what Noel from Mathematica is going to review in a few minutes, but these statistics here are from all our sites. And I certainly want to note that right now we have more employers who have signed agreements to work with us than we do participants. And certainly we feel that that is just crucial to what we're doing because of the importance of making matches and presenting our participants opportunities for great matches. Do note that of the 90 job offers received from employers to participants to date, 70 of them have been accepted by Pathways participants. And we think also that that not only honors the participants and their choices, but goes to the fact that we go sort of, I think, beyond to make sure that that match between participant and employer is a good one. The next slide talks about some of our objectives. I want to focus here for a second on zero exclusion, and it was key with the development of this program to avoid certainly any suggestion that someone else was making decisions as to who was ready and who was not ready for employment. We wanted to avoid that suggestion, and for all the current demonstration sites, they practice zero exclusion. I think it's also really important to note, and Mike referenced it earlier, we are a customized employment program initiative. I think that we have some unique attributes. Our staff structure is a little different than traditional, I think, supportive employment or customized employment programs. Our focus on internships and everybody having the opportunity for paid internships is, I don't want to say it's unique, but I think it's new and certainly I think a real strong characteristic of our services. Mike referenced what earlier was called the EPTA, that's the Employer Payroll Tax Adjustment, and it's a strategy certainly I don't have the time today to describe in its entirety, but it's an adjustment to allow employers an opportunity to access resources that allow for the long-term support and reinforcement of workers that have disabilities on their sites. And certainly my contact information is coming, and anybody that wants to talk more about the EPTA and what we're doing and how Mathematica is evaluating that is certainly welcome to contact me directly. All Pathways participants are presumed ready for careers. Pathways to Careers is not pathways to jobs, it's careers. I think it's also somewhat important to note that we try to sort of take that one step above entry-level jobs, and I'm certainly not knocking the service industry here, but my experience, and I think others' experience with supportive employment, would lead at least to the assumption that before you place somebody or before somebody takes a job in a situation like that, I think there's some things that should be examined. And we try to focus on entry-level careers for participants. We, in cooperation certainly and guidance from MGA, focus hard on process. Pathways to Careers is very process-oriented. We try to be flexible. We've changed our approach based on individual needs, even though this is somewhat of a model. We're not inflexible to change it, especially if it could help somebody succeed. We're person-centered, and we have a focus on customized jobs. We have a focus on systematic construction, and certainly discovery is built into everything we do. Everybody gets it, as Mike had mentioned earlier. We have, from the beginning, focused on both the cost of the services that we offer and the savings that are evident from helping individuals on SSI and SSDI enter the work world. It was part of our original design. It's certainly been a focus of a lot of our evaluation activities. I think it's important to mention that even it really does help justify, and Noel's going to talk a little bit about some of these costs and savings coming up, but it does help justify the intensive person-centered approach that is part and parcel of the Pathways to Careers. I would add, though, that it's not everything, and that we would still support our design even if savings weren't evident. But the fact that they are, I think, lends credence to the work that we're doing, and I think it helps people who are interested in policy at a federal and state level have conversations with us. And we focused on that data from the beginning, and it's, again, a lot to go into in a short presentation today, but certainly worth more conversation. And the folks out there, again, want to discuss or have questions, we're available to that. So we are expanding our demonstration activities in the state of Utah. And our expansion, I think it's crucial to our goals and our future. We need to continue to examine the sustainability of what we're doing and where the supports from various state and federal agencies will come from. We have to, I think, examine Pathways from a perspective of larger than one site, if you will, per state. And I think it's also crucial, and I think we've certainly been upfront with the fact that Pathways has not touched rural America yet. We don't have services in rural settings, and we certainly expect to in our expansion, our upcoming expansion in Utah, to identify and support at least 1 to 2 pathways to career sites in rural America or in Utah. Our SourceAmerica Pathways to Career Director, Therese Fimian, has been strategically engaged in these expansion and planning discussions with the state leaders in Utah. They have been very focused on how pathways can respond to WIOA, and certainly inside of that look as to how pathways to careers and WIOA align, which they do very, very well. Pathways was conceived and started certainly before there was that we had an idea of what WIOA would contain, but that alignment is very strong. We also, in demonstrating and furthering the demonstration in Utah, need to pay particular attention to WIOA and how participants with IDD or autism are going to fit and be served. We also need to continue to learn and build on resources for replication. To date, through, again, the wonderful work that's being done in Boston, in Michigan, in Utah, and here in Northern Virginia, we need to continue to, and we have developed pro formas and business models that reflect how sites can adopt pathways and what the costs initially are and what they are long term and what they can currently expect from certain state funders. We've developed, in cooperation with the folks at MGA, a set of standards that are tied to fidelity indexes and assessment tools. We're currently working on both a learning management system and a case management system for not only the current expansion demonstration sites in Utah, but for overall expansion to other interested parties as Pathways continues to move forward and to grow. I need to certainly, I think, let folks know, especially folks in Utah, that we have a request for proposal that should be out sometime early next year. And it'll be going to targeted geographic locations in the state for folks who are interested in participating in the expansion of the demonstration site. My contact information is here. And again, I thank everybody on the phone today for coming out and wanting to learn a little bit more about what we're up to with SourceAmerica Pathways to Careers. Thank you. And I'm going to turn this over to Noel now.
Hey, Noel, before you start, we're running about 5 minutes behind schedule, I think, so hoping we can speed up just a bit so we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Brian. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Noel Denny Brown, and I'll provide an overview of Mathematica's work evaluating the Pathways to Career program. Our evaluation team is conducting 4 types of analyses, including an implementation, participation, and cost analysis. As Brian mentioned, we're also engaged in conducting an analysis of outcomes using a pre-post comparison design. This is a mixed methods evaluation that relies on several sources of data, including application data, administrative data on program participation and service use, participant surveys, and also qualitative data collected from in-person site visits with key informant. As Brian noted, there are currently 4 demonstration sites. Utah launched in 2012, and the 3 other Pathways sites listed here launched in 2015. And I want to note here that the data that I'll be presenting in the next few slides feature the Utah site only, which has been the focus of our evaluation work thus far. So the slide presents the eligibility criteria and referral sources in the Utah site. Pathways serves adults who have either a primary diagnosis of autism or an intellectual or developmental disability, are ages 18 or older, and reside in Davis County, Utah. People are referred to the program from several sources, including the Employment of Choice program, which is a facility-based employment program administered by PARC, the Davis School District's post-secondary transition programs, and also the Community Supports Waiver Program waiting list for people with intellectual disabilities. In Utah, 91 participants have enrolled in Pathways through the end of 2016. As you can see, participants are age 28 on average and predominantly male. 69% completed high school, obtained their GED, or completed some post-secondary education. Nearly 80% live with their parents or guardians. And I want to note here that at the time of application, about 70% of participants were receiving SSI benefits, and about an additional quarter were receiving SSDI benefits. The statistics shown here on this slide are for those participants who had completed discovery by the end of 2016. On average, participants spent a total of 24 hours in discovery, which was spread over about 17 weeks. On average, participants completed 16 discovery activities, and Pathway staff spent an average of 43 hours per participant conducting those activities. As Mike and Brian noted, paid internships are a central activity of expanded discovery, and this slide presents the characteristics of 130 internships that participants in Utah completed by the end of 2016. As you can see, the median time participants spent in internships was 123 hours over about 10 weeks, with a mean of 21 hours worked per internship per week. Pathway's core mission is to provide people with significant disabilities an informed choice of competitive and integrated employment options. And the top of the slide presents data on the percentage of participants matched to employment. And as you can see, overall, about 27% of internships longer than 2 weeks resulted in employment. And when looking at internships of all durations, 44% of participants were matched to employment after only 1 internship, and another 35% were matched to employment after 2 internships. The bottom of the slide presents characteristics of jobs that 32 participants obtained through the project, through the Utah site. On average, the jobs paid $9.65 per hour, and participants earned about $1,124 per month. Almost half of the jobs provided monthly earnings that on average exceed the monthly substantial gainful activity level that is set by SSA, and this level was $1,130 per month in 2016. For participants who receive SSI or SSDI benefits, which is the vast majority of Pathways program participants, sustained earnings at this level could eventually reduce their disability benefits to 0. So I'm going to switch gears now and present findings from an analysis of the cost to operate Pathways in the Utah site. Our estimates indicate that the average per participant cost is about $12,000 for 1 year, and this excludes overhead costs and also costs associated with recruitment and intake. We excluded the overhead costs because they're essentially an artifact of the demonstration, and other programs implementing Pathways in their locale would not incur these overhead costs. We found that the average total cost of serving a participant from the time of intake to employment among those who became employed was about $24,000. And when examining outcomes, we looked at follow-up surveys conducted with participants 24 months after intake, and we observed a 25% average reduction in SSI and SSDI benefits relative to the month prior to intake. And this benefit reduction is likely attributable to increased earnings from employment obtained through Pathways. I'm going to go back one sec here. I just want to point out before we move on that if employment and earnings at this level are sustained, this reduction in benefits could translate into average lifetime reductions in SSI or SSDI benefits of about $44,000 per participant. And these estimates of potential lifetime savings could even be higher if savings to other public programs such as Medicare and Medicaid accrue. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to feature findings from case studies of 2 employers to help understand, specific factors that have contributed to their successful partnership with Pathways. When selecting employers to feature in these case studies, we ended up selecting those employers that hosted a minimum of 4 Pathways internships, hired at least 2 participants as employees, and used the employer payroll tax adjustment that Brian spoke of. We think this research is really important because it helps to shed light on employer motivations to partner with Pathways, and it can also inform the staff's efforts to recruit prospective employers. It can also aid in replicating the program as the service model is expanded beyond the 4 demonstration sites in Utah. This slide here just summarizes our methods of the 93 Utah employers that partnered with Pathways through 2016. 2 employers, Futura Industries and the Davis School District, met these criteria and were featured in these case studies. We conducted semi-structured in-person interviews with staff from both organizations, including a company executive, a high-level administrator in the district, the direct supervisor, Pathways participants who were hired at Futura and the Davis School District, and also Pathways staff who've interacted with the employers and also provided support to participants along the way. The research questions that we explored focused on understanding why the employer chose to participate in Pathways, the employer's experience with the employer payroll tax adjustment that Pathways offers, and also staff perceptions of the program. We also investigated the employer's experience hosting Pathways participants as interns and experience hiring employees through the program. The respondents we met with offered many important lessons that can help to inform program staff's efforts to build their networks of employers. So what do we learn? Well, first, we asked respondents why their organization chose to participate in Pathways. And respondents from both Futura and the Davis School District stated that the paid internships were a deciding factor in wanting to collaborate with Pathways. The internships were helpful in revealing the degree of compatibility between each participant's interests, skills, and abilities, and the requirements of the position. According to one Futura respondent, the internships, quote, removed the fear of the unknown and also signaled to staff very early on in the process whether the internship was a suitable placement. For the Davis School District, the internships provided a no-risk way for staff to observe Pathways participants' ability to support their staff and also assess whether that placement could be a really, really good fit for their organization and their teams. We also learned that early support from Pathways staff and open communication with the direct supervisor were really vital to helping assimilate participants to Futura. Pathways staff worked alongside participants for the first couple of weeks of the internship and provided really valuable support to help each individual become acquainted with their new coworkers, understand the practices, policies, and norms in the workplace, and also to help them learn how to perform their job duties effectively and to the expectations of their coworkers. Frequent and open communication between participants and their supervisors also helped to establish trust early on and identify potential needed accommodations. One participant in particular was characterized as initially very shy and intimidated, and through open communication with his direct supervisor, he grew very comfortable in the internship over a short period of time and gained a lot of confidence in his abilities to perform his job duties. We also learned that working and earning competitive wages has helped many Pathways participants become financially independent. Futura hired 2 Pathways participants in 2013 and 2015, and both have since become financially independent and have left the federal disability benefit roles. 2 participants hired by the Davis School District have also transitioned off of disability benefits since becoming employed because they became ineligible for the benefits due to earning substantial wages. Many of these participants also enjoy rich benefits packages, including healthcare coverage and 401k benefits. We also asked Futura and Davis School District staff what they would tell other employers that are approached to participate in Pathways or are considering hiring people with disabilities. And according to the staff we met with, Pathways participants have been really strong additions to their organization's workforce and have resulted in positive changes to the organization's culture and the employees. These successful placements have really opened people's minds to the possibility of hiring and working alongside people with disabilities. One Futura staff member noted the change that the participant has made within our organization and the departments he's worked within has been very positive. He brings out the very best in people. And if you look at the participant and what he's achieved and learned while here, that's huge. But if you look at what he's brought to the culture and staff within the entire organization, that's even greater. An administrator within the Davis School District conveyed that Pathways has opened everyone's mind to the fact that people with disabilities can be successful. A lot of employers would say we'd welcome somebody with a disability, but in reality you go in with fear, and this initiative has helped to ease that speculation and fear. In closing, I'd like to acknowledge my colleague Marissa Shank, who co-authored both of the employee case studies. You can access both the case studies and also a descriptive fact sheet about Pathways on our website. The URL is listed here. And next, Spencer Bird from Futura Industries will speak about his organization's experience partnering with Pathways.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Noelle, and I'm grateful to be here to share a little bit of our perspective and experience with the Pathway Career program. To start, I want to talk a little bit about an overview, background of Futura Industries. Futura Industries is an aluminum extrusion facility. We don't only extrude aluminum, we fabricate and manufacture aluminum. To give you a quick background and understanding of our process, aluminum extrusion is the process of heating aluminum to about 1,000 degrees and pushing it through a die or a shape. So the material that we deal with is extremely hot. We have some very corrosive and dangerous chemicals that we deal with, some state-of-the-art machinery that we're working with, and Futura has been recognized as one of the best places to work in Utah. We've been recognized as Manufacturer of the Year for multiple years in the state of Utah as well. We have heavily been involved with the Davis Chamber, and as we were at a conference with the Davis Chamber, and the presenter was talking about the Pathways to Careers, as we listened to the presentation and looked at the philosophies of Pathways and their mission, it was in line with Futura's in our culture. And initially, as a management team, we thought that this would be a great program to get involved with. But as you can imagine, an industrial manufacturing industry that we're in, we were very timid and afraid of the safety issues, the potential hazards that would come. Most of our material is very high quality, and so there was some reservations that we had with pursuing this, but as we continued to discuss this opportunity and the program, there are a few individuals here that have family members with disabilities, and so we had determined, what do we have to lose? And as we looked at the program more in depth, and as you've heard through the presentations, we really have nothing to lose. It's a free paid internship. As we found, they have a sponsor that would come, a staff member from Park and part of Pathways that would come and identify the workload and the departments, the area in which the individual was capable of working, and we thought, okay, let's take a chance, and man, are we grateful that we did. It's been a fantastic opportunity for us to be involved with that, and our management team has seen great effects, not only in the individuals that have come to work for us, but in our own culture and the people that they work with. Many of you have dealt with these individuals and seen how they change people's attitudes, perspective on life, and it has been just fantastic to see them progress and grow within the departments and within our culture and our company. And as I mentioned a little bit before, and you see in the slide, the paid internship again was a motivation for us to participate in this. And going through the internship, I think it was Mike that talked a little bit earlier about their opportunities within our industry that might be better suited for a lower paid individual, and that's kind of where we initially started through the process, finding those types of tasks for these individuals to start in, and through that, these individuals were able to learn, to gain confidence. We as well were able to gain confidence in them and knowing that through correct training and processes that these individuals could be very valuable to our organization. And through the process, I won't say that there weren't any accommodations made, but we found as we got further and further in the process that there was less and less accommodations that we had to make for these individuals. And so now we've hosted 4 internships. We have 2 now that have been offered, and they've accepted full-time jobs from 2013 and 2015. Of those individuals, you can see in the pictures here, Josh has grown, and he's been in 3 different departments within our company. Josh has now earned 3 certifications within our company, and so those menial tasks that we talked about before, he is now actually certified in 3 different areas of production, very high quality material that he's capable of doing, become a fantastic team member to our individuals, and we found that there is a place for these individuals and can benefit an industrial environment such as ours. So I spoke a little bit before, but the Pathways program, they provide a supervisor that comes in. They give us, the employer, I guess a resume of the individual, what their disabilities are, what their capabilities are, pair them with the jobs that might suit their abilities, and have been a huge benefit to us in helping this program take off. Initially, we did have flexible work schedules, that we made those accommodations, and over time we found these individuals are capable of the 8 to 10 hour work schedules that we run. So those work schedules have been shifted back to a regular schedule as everyone else. And these are regular employees that benefit, add value to our company, continue to impress and grow within our departments. Again, those of you who are on this call are thinking about this. Some employers, I would say, just do it. Take the leap. It's been a fantastic program, not only for the individual. You've heard some of the statements and how they have been, how it's changed their lives, but it changes the lives every day of our employees here at Futura Industries. Thank you again for allowing me to tell you a little bit of our experiences and the great success that we've had with this program. I'll turn it over to...
Yeah, me. Thank you, Spencer. This is great. And just before we turn it over to Joe, just let me remind everybody that if you want to submit questions, and I see quite a few people already have, please go ahead and do that now, and we will turn to those questions immediately. Joe, we managed to catch up on the time. Please take your full 10 minutes, I will give you a 2-minute warning. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I appreciate that greatly. I do want to say thanks for including me in this discussion. It's been great for me to hear this. And I want to break my comments down into 4 areas. And the first of those is the importance of the model, or the career pathways model we're hearing, to creating opportunities for competitive integrated employment for individuals with severe disabilities or significant disabilities. And I want to go into what Mike was talking about, that we've got to find ways to do this more than one by one. I think that's huge. And what I heard today was a framework around which one can approach something to begin to say in an area or at a state or across the state, here's a way to approach this, here's how we can develop a system. And I think that's important. But even more important to me than that is we heard both Mike and Brian mention flexibility. So you've got a framework which gives you the things you have to think about, the things that are probably the non-negotiables, the fidelity of the model types of things. But the flexibility within that to literally make the model work for every individual. And I think that's crucial as we begin to build things out. The other piece I think is important in the way this model was put together, of this concept, is they built it with the research evaluators in the room, is how I would suggest. You've got them early involvement of folks. What Noel was presenting gave you, if you are trying to replicate, gave you some things to think about in terms of approaching the businesses and about how to think about stories you might tell or ways you might get people engaged in this process if they're on the business side of the equation. So I think that's very important, and I salute the trio here for thinking that way as you're building something. SourceAmerica we're looking down the road, saw something that needed to happen, and here they are putting some of the top people in the country at this solution to say, how can we build something that will work for people to have choices? And that's critical in this process. I also say that I think building in from the beginning, I would call it work incentives and benefits analysis or benefits counseling early on, so that everybody understands what's happening if they choose to go to work at certain levels, I think is critical. It also sets up more of the ticket to work, which I didn't hear as much of, but I think should be a part of this, and I think it is in the evaluation piece, about how one can tap into both if you're on the VR side, Partnership Plus, and if you're an employment network, the Ticket to Work Employment Network model, so that we have long-term employment supports that can be built into this process to continue folks' opportunities. And I think that's pretty critical overall in this process. I would also say that I am totally intrigued by I would call it a bold policy initiative when you look at the employer-related tax adjustment, I guess it's the payroll tax adjustment. I think it's great to be looking at different ways to support these long-term employment supports, to create opportunities for them. And I think that's a bold concept. I think beginning to look at that is going to help inform us down the road. The other piece that I think is more implied than I heard directly with this is in the what I would call the enlightened self-interest approach to program development. And when I say that, I mean having people engaged in the process from all aspects of this, in what is in it. I hate to say what's in it for them, but it's really about what helps their clients. What does the business gain from this? What does the client get, which I think is the most important and the thing people will work around. But how does it work for agencies? How do you bring funding? Because that's how you get people to participate, in my experience, is you show them that it's in everybody's interest, particularly that of the clients, and you get people willing to throw in and try something new, put programs together, think a little differently than what they might be currently doing. So I think that process around this flexibility within a framework really does work if you throw in people participating, looking at braiding funding. I would say on the business engagement is critical in this model. And I would slightly disagree with Mike's assessment in there, in that I do think this is demand side. But it's a little differently than what Mike was referring to as demand side. To me, it's demand side with business. When you go in and you learn the business, you understand the culture, you understand the jobs, you interact with them to find ways that make this for the better bottom line of the business. And in some businesses, in all businesses, it is the profit motive, which is just the reality of the world. And the other part of it is there's a environment, a culture in the business, and sometimes that's important to them. We just need to understand these things as we begin to look at the services. I also love the approach. There's a lot of negotiating going on in this model. I mean, you're negotiating salary levels, internship sites, and the job itself, and moving things around. And in the old carve-out days, we'd go in and say, well, we want to carve this piece out. This framework to me is different. It's saying, how can we help your business through the talents and the passion of an individual that we've been able to show you has this talent and passion? How can we help you with your business? And I think that approach is demand side, and I think that's critical. I also like the fact that it's giving people strategies on how to do this that are pretty clear. I think that's in the law, I think Mike said, but it's still teaching people how to do that that's going to be critical, because sometimes people that are really good at working with folks in support employment types of environments or this direct service environment aren't exactly the best negotiators in the world. And sometimes they're really good at it. So making sure we teach them to be the really good at it side, I think, is important. I would also go into the client benefit. I think the Social Security, the work incentives and benefits counseling is critical in this process, and it is a benefit to the client. But I like the way we are looking at the matching of an individual strengths, and you're pulling information from all factors of their life. And I think that's going to be huge, or it probably is huge already based on the data we've been seeing, in helping understand where an individual's interests are, what environments they like, and where their passion is, because that's what gets people motivated. One of the people that I talked to in prepping for this that's been involved in some career pathways, or this pathways to careers concept, was telling me that in the old days when they went through a lot of different support employment pieces or other kinds of assessments, people would get frustrated because they were in the system for a long time and not in a successful way. With this model, they're seeing people re-engaging, and they're seeing people get excited and some energy back for going to work and being supported, and I think that's huge. I also think the clients in this get opportunities to try things out in an environment that is very supportive of them, but at the same time you've got behavioral, like positive behavioral supports, other kinds of supports being brought in. I'm surmising that there's some assistive technology being brought into the work sites in some cases for accommodations, maybe not in all cases. But those kinds of supports, what does it take to help this person be successful is the model I heard, and I think that's a serious way to go forward. So the other piece that I would...
Joe, two minutes, Joe.
I was on a roll. Anyway.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
The other thing I would say in terms of expanding the value proposition, I think finding the way to braid the funds and take it from the savings that might be at the national level in SSA and other kinds of programs to getting the agencies to work together to come to an outcome. That's where the value proposition is for me with this. Also, I believe there's probably going to be some economies of scale, and after we get folks trained up, I think those costs per client that we're seeing here are going to go down. But that's because we've got to get more people in the system. We've got to train people up to a critical level, as we noted earlier that Mike was talking about, and make sure we have the certificates, the training, and the expertise. And with that, I think we're going to see some better outcomes, and I think we'll also see people engaging in different kinds of employment successes. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Joe. That's great. So we've got just about 25 minutes for questions and answers. I see we have quite a few questions. Steve, do you want to direct me to something?
Sure thing. So our first question comes from Jared Pena from the Idaho Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. It's a two-part question. The first part is, what type of disabilities did the participants have in this study? And the second part is, what would be the bare minimum of functioning to benefit from the Pathways program?
Is that for you, Michael? I guess just speak up if you think you have the answer.
Yes, I can. This is Mike Callahan, and the primary focus of disability was on developmental disabilities, and then later we looked at people on the autism. And we wanted to do this because we felt like these groups were particularly left out. And without being, I mean, I don't want to appear frivolous on the answer to the second part, but literally, if a person is alive, they're considered functioning in a way to benefit from this program. In fact, the program has no stipulations as to level of functioning, and we do not get to choose the people that we've been working with, at least for the evaluation part of this. Mathematica randomly assigns people to us. There probably is some self-selection in the application process. Some families, I mean, you may have individuals who would not be able to complete an application that would need family support, and maybe some families would possibly feel that my family member has a disability of such significance we shouldn't apply. But we don't hold that stipulation at all. We welcome anybody. It's not to say that we're smug about our ability to make sure that work works for everybody, but we know that we need to offer it and try to figure it out. So there's absolutely no stipulation for that other than what I just said. So thank you for that question.
Steve? Steve, I can't hear you. You muted?
All right, our next question is from Joanne Snyder. I was muted. From the Chrysalis collaboration. And she asks, what kinds of internships were developed and what kinds of jobs did people get? And regarding jobs with a career ladder, can you give examples of the kinds of jobs and promotions that have occurred so far?
Sounds like you again, Michael.
And I would also welcome Brian and Spencer into this, and Noel may also have some perspectives about it. Once we identified employment, potential host employers, and we did that in two ways. One, through the 16 career clusters from the trade association, whose job it is to identify career clusters within the economy in our country. We sought to have representatives, and also through the discovery process and the plan that occurs at the end of discovery. If there was not a standing host employer, we would actually go out and develop on behalf of an individual a host employer. And actually our percentages are about 50-50 when people choose from a standing employer. Now the reason I say that is because to get to the answer to the question, what kinds of internships, because of customized employment, and these are task-based relationships rather than position-based relationships. So as I was listening, for instance, to Spencer, I know both the gentlemen who have had internships that turned into jobs there. Then one of the things that happens, you start with tasks that fit within both for the individual and the company. And that can vary across all of the different businesses. Now, Spencer's business is manufacturing. We had people in education. We had people in city government. We had people in every imaginable aspect of the work economy, although, frankly, we do try to avoid those most traditional service jobs that really would not be that would not have a career ladder associated with it. So it's not that we feel like those jobs are somehow problematic, but they're not typically career-oriented, so we would go to those kinds of places. And then, again, I want to refer to Spencer's comments about the gentleman who worked at Futura. It started very task-based, and also, as the term Spencer used, was accommodated from their perspective that hours were stipulated and locations within the business were. But as you move toward a career ladder in a place like that, one of the things that inevitably happens with customized is a good customized job match almost always moves toward the typical business process. And that's exactly what Spencer found out for us. So you would know that you're on a career ladder if your customized job that fits uniquely you is beginning to look like other jobs in the area, in the workplace, and maybe even having promotions, and that either could finally be you're in now a job that has a typical job title, or the tasks within your customized job description and customized job title now represent increased wages for you, increased hours if that works, or maybe areas of interest. It could just be some tasks that you really wanted to do. So those would be the kind of opportunities I would reflect for this, or experiences I would reflect with this question, but some of you may have some others.
Brian, Spencer, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, this is Brian. Maybe just slightly off topic, but I would add that when we talk about our employer partners, those are employers in the local communities that our demonstration sites serve who have assigned agreements. I know there are some forthcoming questions around, for example, why this number of internships and this number of jobs, but I could answer that by saying, A, our employers sign detailed agreements saying what they will do, and then they see what we will do. All of our employer partners agree if there's an internship to consider strongly somebody for employment after the completion of that internship. Certainly there are times during those processes where people decide that that's not a good match for them, and employers decide it may not be a good match. Spencer, anything to add, sir?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it really is a case-by-case basis. And as Michael said, that, bring them in, start with some very simple tasks that are needed, and with each individual, you're going to find, their abilities vary, and we've had some internships that have come, and some individuals who are unable to learn the repetitive processes that we have, or unable to do more than just one process that didn't work for that particular area. But it is going to be a case-by-case basis. I guess that's the best I can say.
Brian, maybe you could, I think you saw this question already from Curtis Richards about why the Pathways participants received only 90 job offers after 190 internships. I thought you might want to explain that.
Yes, it's not always, it's one of the reasons we use internships to expand sort of the discovery evaluation process. These aren't always great matches. Initially, a lot of the people that we've worked for have had very limited exposure to the world of work. And we, A, believe strongly in long internships so people have an opportunity to integrate themselves into the employment setting. But at the same time, there are certainly situations where the participants have decided that they want to explore another internship, or that they've decided that it may not be an appropriate job match for them. Ditto for employers. Everybody that we've helped find an internship with, employers, I think, are overall extremely engaged and see our program as a unique way to reach out to people. But that doesn't always mean that the match is perfect. And when we talk about good matches, when we talk about customized employment, we see internships as sort of just strengthening that process. They're all not going to work perfectly. And we're going to learn during those internships and then continue to work with people. Because somebody is not successful in their first internship does not mean they won't be successful in a job or won't be successful in their second internship.
Brian, this is Mike Callahan, and I'd like to add one more part to this, to kind of the theme that Brian DeAtley just addressed, and that is one of the most surprising pieces of data that's emerged from this project is that very close to 25%, I know it's over 20%, Noel will probably know the answer to this better than I, but between 20 and 25% of all job offers by employers have been rejected by participants. So it's not just a bad or a unfortunate or not effective job match, but sometimes people actually go through an internship. The employer thinks, well, this person could really make a contribution in my company, make a job offer, and then have those job offers rejected in favor of getting a better match for themselves. And that, it speaks to a number of things, but one of the things it really speaks for to me is people making decisions about their lives in ways that we would hope that they would, but I'm unfortunately surprised that they're doing it like that. I would have guessed almost every job offer would have resulted in an acceptance, and it's just not the case.
Yeah, Mike, this is Noel. I can provide a little bit more context as well. When we had met and interviewed several Pathways participants about 1 year ago, you're exactly right that in some cases Pathways participants ended up declining the job offer because it just wasn't an ideal match for them. In one particular case, the commute to the work setting was just much too long. In another case, a participant noted that the start of the shift was just very early in the day and wasn't really best suited to his schedule, his preferred schedule. So there are definitely several cases in which the participant ends up declining a job offer in favor of pursuing other opportunities.
Okay, Steve, did you want me to go with the one from Tammy? Is that the plan?
Oh, sorry, I just pushed the question from Susan Bacon. But we could cover the Tammy question first.
Well, all right, I've got that queued up. So Tammy Amsbog from CDD says, I'm interested in the standards and fidelity information. Do you have any information or comment on a comparison of this model with the IPS-supported employment model used in serving the MI, I think that means mentally ill population? Not sure.
David, I could go ahead and give that.
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
Gatley. I could go ahead and give that a try.
Yep. Go ahead.
I think certainly we looked at their fidelity model, and we're certainly aware of the great work that IPS has been doing for a long time. I think the biggest difference, obviously, is in the population served. IPS focuses on folks with predominantly mental health issues. Certainly we have participants in Pathways with some mental health concerns, but those folks are, generally speaking, have dual diagnoses and are IDDD or persons with autism. Our standards and fidelity our fidelity model is really based out of our standards, and our standards are primarily based on the principles of customized employment as championed by MGA, with certainly some input here from the SourceAmerica team.
Okay, thank you. Steve, which one did you have queued up?
If I could add real quickly to that, certainly I think IPS is a much more traditional supportive employment model, and as most of us have mentioned previously, Pathways to Careers is a customized employment model.
Thanks, Steve.
This next question is from Miranda Kennedy at the National Disability Institute. And she asks, have you coordinated your work with U.S. DOL ETA-funded DEI projects? Massachusetts and Virginia both have DEI projects, and Georgia and Hawaii have projects on serving a targeted population of individuals with more significant disabilities.
I believe that would be Brian, but this plan,
Can I answer?
Go ahead, Brian.
Can I jump in here? This is Joe Ashley. We had a kickoff meeting of the DEI Round 8 in Virginia last Friday, and the director of the Virginia project was in the audience as a part of the group that was in the discussion about how we're setting that up. She wasn't there specifically for this purpose because she has some other roles, but it will come up in the conversation. So I guess we haven't exactly coordinated, but we will be discussing in Virginia. I can't speak for anything else.
Okay. Maybe we should move on to another question then.
This next question is from Hank Brady at Spark Philadelphia, and he asks, based on the monthly earnings and hourly rate information that you shared, what was the average number of hours worked per week?
Noelle, do you have an answer for that?
I can look back at my notes. Let me look back at my notes, and I will try to respond momentarily. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll move on to another question.
Bell is doing that. This is Mike. We've been seeing out of the site in Utah, particularly, about 22 to 23 hours, and that she'll have much more specific numbers. But note that we tried to have the hours in internships match a critical mass of hours that our partners at Mathematica had determined to be around 22 or 23 hours as being if you could get employment at that rate, it really begins to start returning some resources to the system. So our employment has mirrored that to a pretty great degree.
Yeah, so I just looked back at my notes. I'm just looking at the experience of participants and interns working at Futura. And by and large, the participants working at Futura worked close to a full-time schedule. The number of hours worked per week within the Davis School District is a little bit different. It's a little bit lower, ranging to about 20 hours per week on average.
Let me just jump in there. Actually, at Futura now, both are working 40-plus hours, so they are working full schedules. That helps.
Thanks, Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I thought I saw a question about how the internships are financed from the employer's perspective. I was looking for the question now, but maybe somebody could just comment on that.
David, this is Brian Diatley. SourceAmerica Pathways to Careers is currently funding probably close to 100% of all internship dollars right now. We have one of our sites that has a small community grant to assist with those dollars, but primarily the funding for the project is coming from SourceAmerica right now.
Yeah. Thanks. Steve, you have another one?
Yes, this question is from Susan Bacon that we had queued up earlier. She's from the Florida Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, and she asks, how long is a typical internship, and when do individuals move out of internships into employment? What guidelines do you use?
Again, this is Brian Diatley. I think our typical internship right now is going to about 9 weeks. Our guidelines for establishing that time would be a time where somebody with one of our participants can really fully engage and integrate into the work site. We've certainly got feedback in the past because of it's really the one sustainability hurdle that we see in our model, and people have said, well, why not just make internships 2 weeks, or why not make internships just 4 weeks? And our response to that is typically that doesn't give either the employer or the participant enough time to really be considered part of the work site. And we try to make sure that a participant's experience mirrors a real work experience. And even though some of the internships are slightly shorter than 9 weeks, some have certainly been a little bit longer. Some have been expanded for various reasons. Flexibility is certainly part of that. But when we were planning this, and in negotiations and feedback from employers, we kind of settled on 8 to 12 weeks, and it's looking about 9 weeks then. A formal meeting is held at that point to establish what are the next steps. Is it going to go to hire? Is it going to go to further internships? Is this job going to be a good match?
And Brian, on top of that, this is Callahan. We extensively use the value and power of systematic instruction and blended with natural supports. So our internship facilitators, the equivalent of a job coach, one of the guidelines is that throughout the internship, the facilitator is attempting to support both the intern and the employer so that the tasks are formed correctly and appropriately, and that the primary relationship is with the employer and not with the internship facilitator. So there's fading of assistance that goes on, and if we're able to fade that assistance pretty quickly and still maintain the natural supports offered by the employer and the productivity of not the performance more even than productivity, but both of the intern, then the internship could be somewhat shorter. But we're having pretty dramatic lessening of facilitator supports, say as compared to typical supported employment data that just seems to be an hour of a job coach with an hour of a supported employee. We're seeing much better than that, and that's one of the main guidelines that you would use to determine that an internship. You could begin to think about going to the meeting that Brian mentioned.
So we have time for one more question, I think, and then we'll have to wrap up. And maybe the best one to ask is from Tammy Amsbach, again, from CDD. And that is, are you planning to expand the number of pilots, and is there an application process? Sounds like she wants to apply.
Yes, this is Brian again. We are, our initial planning when we started this with Michael Callahan and Martin Gary, and I mentioned it earlier, we want to expand. We believe that the expansion right now of the demonstration sites at our project in Utah is justified. During that expansion phase of the demonstration in Utah, we have already entertained, and I'm not sure we're entirely ready, but we're certainly currently entertaining folks who are interested in working with us on our model. Anybody on the phone who wants more information or is interested in establishing a pilot site is welcome to certainly give us a call. We have some pro formas. We've done some business planning. We think we've got a pretty good grip on how much this should cost. And we think that we can also provide guidance to service providers in certain states as to how Pathways to Careers integrates with current funding in their states, and can work and certainly are more than willing to work with them to do that. I would anticipate that above and beyond the expansion in Utah in this coming year in 2018, that we would see at least the development of maybe 2 or 3 additional pilot sites at that time.
Thank you, Brian. Well, this is great. I want to thank all of the presenters. We'll give them a silent round of applause. It's always one shortcoming of doing a webinar. I also want to thank the participants. We had a lot of good questions. We did not answer them all. We are going to try to answer them and send them around to the people who've signed up. So look forward to those in the next couple of days. But I really appreciate everybody's participation in this event, and we hope to have many more in the future. Thank you.